In the arid and turbulent region of Israel, the territory was divided among tribes that fought not only for space, but also for influence and power. During this period of great instability, neighboring nations, including the Philistines, were always ready to exploit any vulnerability to invade and expand their territories. At that time, King Saul, who had been appointed by the prophet Samuel, faced a deep crisis, with political and spiritual challenges. Saul, once a courageous and respected leader, was in decline, losing his authority due to questionable choices and his distancing from God. According to the account in 1 Samuel 28:6, he attempted to seek divine guidance, but received no answer, neither through dreams, nor through Urim, nor from the prophets. Thus the king, who had begun his reign with high expectations, now found himself in a psychological and moral collapse, frightened by the growing threat of the Philistines. Previously brave, the king was now dominated by fear and uncertainty, feeling the burden of having lost God's trust. In 1 Samuel 13:1, we read that his reign would not last, for God had already chosen another to lead, due to the king's failures to follow his commands. During this difficult period, in a secluded and gloomy village called Endor, lived a woman known as the Witch of Endor. She lived on the margins of society and was both respected and feared for her knowledge of the occult arts. Saul, despite having banned these practices, was so desperate that he decided to seek her out for help. Now, before we continue our story, remember to subscribe and like this video. Your interactions help spread the word of God. Continuing, in 1 Samuel 28:7, Saul instructed his servants to find a woman who could summon spirits for consultation. In a moment of great anguish, Saul decided to seek the counsel of the Witch of Endor. Although he had previously banned soothsayers and sorcerers in the kingdom, the threat of a Philistine invasion and the lack of response from God led him to this dangerous choice on a dark, moonless night. Disguised to avoid being identified, he and two of his most loyal servants began the most perilous and forbidden journey of their lives. With pounding hearts, they moved through the darkness towards Endor. With each step, Saul felt the serious potential consequences of his actions, as if the very earth rejected him, reminding him of the transgression he was about to commit. Driven by the need for guidance amidst the chaos, he continued towards a meeting that could determine the fate of his kingdom. At the end of their journey, under a starless sky, they reached a secluded hut on the outskirts of Endor. The small, worn house was barely distinguishable in the shadows, practically invisible under the faint moonlight. As they approached, the silence of the night made each step on the dry leaves echo alarmingly, like a dark omen. Upon reaching the door, Saul stopped, breathing heavily, affected by both the physical effort and the increasing anxiety. He gently touched the door, and after a brief moment, a figure appeared, illuminated by the dim light of a candle. It was the Witch of Endor, who looked at him with an expression of surprise and caution. "Who comes at this hour?" she asked, her voice trembling with fear and distrust. "I seek a knowledge that only you possess," Saul replied, striving to keep his voice calm. "I promise, in the name of Jehovah, that no harm will come to you for helping me," he assured her, invoking the name of the God whose commands he had disobeyed by seeking the dead. His desperation was palpable. The witch watched them closely, gauging the tension that hung in the air like a thick fog. Eventually, she agreed to help, moved by resignation or by the conviction conveyed in the king's voice. "Whom do you wish me to summon?" she inquired, leading them into a dark room surrounded by herbs and mystical symbols. As mentioned in 1 Samuel 28:11, she asked, "Whom shall I bring to you?" And he responded, "Bring me Samuel." The atmosphere became tense as the witch began the ritual, chanting softly amidst the smell of incense and damp earth. Suddenly, a spectral figure began to form in the center of the room, imposing and ethereal. Upon recognizing Samuel, the woman exclaimed, "Why have you deceived me? You are Saul." The king reassured her, asking, "Do not be afraid. What do you see?" She answered, "I see gods rising from the earth." Seeing the apparition, Saul instinctively stepped back, his heart pounding. The spectral figure took the form of an elderly man, cloaked in a cape, and although his face was difficult to discern clearly, his presence was immensely imposing. Saul, accustomed to leading battles and following the advice of prophets, now faced a completely new challenge, confronting the mysteries of death and the afterlife. His reaction was a mix of awe and even deeper despair, aware that this encounter could change not only his own fate, but also the future of all Israel. The tension in the cottage was almost palpable as the figure of Samuel became clearer before Saul's astonished eyes. The spirit of Samuel, even as a mere apparition, emanated an undeniable authority, typical of his life as a prophet. As reported in 1 Samuel 28:15, Samuel asked, "Why have you disturbed me by bringing me back?" His voice was so deep and powerful that it seemed to emerge directly from the earth. Trembling before the presence he both desired and feared to encounter, Saul managed to express himself despite his deep despair. He said, "I am deeply distressed, for the Philistines threaten me and God has distanced himself from me. He no longer responds, neither through prophets nor in dreams. That's why I turned to you to find out what I should do." Saul's frail and downtrodden figure starkly contrasted with the imposing appearance of Samuel. Samuel, as direct as in his days on earth, retained all authority in his voice, even though it was supernatural. He confronted Saul. "Why do you consult me if the Lord has turned away from you and become your adversary? The Lord has fulfilled his word. He has taken the kingdom from your hands and given it to David, because you did not follow the Lord's commands and did not carry out his stern judgment on Amalek. That is why the Lord has acted in this way today." Samuel's words struck Saul with devastating impact. Every phrase the Spirit uttered was a condemnation, confirming his fate with relentless clarity. Saul was shaken by this revelation. His soul, already disturbed by doubts and fears, sank even deeper into profound despair and remorse. In 1 Samuel 28:19, Samuel made a grim prediction. "Tomorrow you and your sons will be with me. The Lord will deliver the army of Israel into the hands of the Philistines." These were Samuel's last words, leaving a sepulchral silence that echoed through the cabin. As the ritual came to an end, the figure of Samuel began to fade, disappearing as gradually as he had appeared. The witch, who silently observed this supernatural encounter, was both frightened and fascinated. Despite her familiarity with spiritual rituals, the intensity of what she had just witnessed surpassed any previous experience. With Samuel's disappearance, all eyes turned to Saul, whose desolate and defeated figure starkly contrasted with the relentless fate that had been revealed to him. A fate that both she and Saul clearly understood. The events of that night would forever transform the history of Israel. After Samuel's apparition disappeared, Saul remained motionless, visibly shaken by the dark prophecies. The king, who was once energetic and assertive, now seemed merely a shadow of his former self. Divine rejection and the certainty of a tragic fate crushed his spirit, causing him to fall to the cabin floor, trembling not only from cold, but also from fear of what the future held. His pale and troubled face mirrored the internal torment of a man who had lost everything. As described in 1 Samuel 28:20, Saul then collapsed suddenly, shaken by Samuel's words and also weakened by the lack of food throughout the day and night. The Witch of Endor, knowledgeable about the mysteries of death and the beyond, felt pity for the shaken king. She approached Saul carefully, offering words of consolation. Although aware that her power was limited to change his fate, she said, as mentioned in 1 Samuel 28:22, "I have heeded your request and risked my life for you. Now please listen to me. Let me prepare something for you to eat, so you will have the strength to continue." Knowing that Saul had gone through the day and part of the night without eating, the witch promptly began to make a meal in her simple home. She sacrificed a fatted calf that she kept for emergencies, prepared flour, and baked unleavened bread. Her speed and efficiency contrasted with Saul's inertia. She then served the food, a modest meal that she hoped would at least rejuvenate the body, if not the spirit of the troubled king. As recorded in 1 Samuel 28:24, she quickly prepared the calf, baked unleavened bread, and served everything in front of Saul and his servants, who then ate. The meal occurred in complete silence. Saul ate mechanically, without truly tasting or feeling hungry, his thoughts sunk in a deep abyss of despair as he reflected on his condition. Haunted by the loss of divine love and the kingdom that would pass to another, each bite Saul took felt like ashes. The dinner dragged on, weighed down by the fate he knew was unchangeable. Upon finishing, he rose with effort, aware that he needed to return to the camp, face his men, and lead them in a battle he believed he was destined to lose. Despite the fear that dominated his heart, a bitter resolution took shape within him. The witch, with a look that mixed sympathy and relief, watched Saul and his men depart. She had witnessed many fates unfold in her dark home, but few were as tragic as Saul's on that dark night in Endor. Saul and his companions returned to the Israelite camp. Upon their arrival, the king's somber and distant expression was noted by the soldiers, who exchanged murmurs and worried glances as he headed to his tent, unable to hide the anguish marked on his face. The hours before the battle were filled with intense activity. Soldiers sharpened swords and adjusted armor, while commanders outlined strategies by torchlight, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. Meanwhile, Saul remained isolated in his tent, immersed in his thoughts and tormented by Samuel's words, feeling the weight of his rejection. Even as he tried to prepare for combat, Saul was visibly destabilized, and his morale was completely shattered. At dawn, the Philistines attacked with overwhelming force, and the sound of battle echoed through the valley. The Israeli soldiers fought valiantly, but the demotivation caused by their leaders' disturbance and the numerical advantage of the adversaries began to work against them. Amidst the chaos, Saul fought with the desperation of someone who had nothing left to lose. The battle intensified, and many Israelis fell on Mount Gilboa. Saul's death occurred as had been foretold in Samuel's prophecy. Severely wounded by Philistine archers and facing imminent defeat, the king made his final choice. He preferred to die by his own hands rather than be captured. With a final gesture of determination, Saul threw himself onto his own sword, ending his life and his reign in a tragic manner. As described in 1 Samuel 31, Saul asked his shield-bearer, "Draw your sword and kill me, to prevent these pagans from killing me and mocking me." However, the shield-bearer, overcome with fear, was unable to fulfill the request. Saul then took the sword and fell upon it. Seeing his king dead, the shield-bearer also committed suicide with his own sword and died beside Saul. Saul's death had a profound impact across all of Israel, like a cold wind spreading sadness through the cities and villages. The country mourned not only the loss of its king, but also the embarrassment of a defeat to the Philistines. This sad event marked a turning point for the nation, which now needed to face its own vulnerability and seek new leadership that could restore its strength and faith while reflecting on Saul's legacy. The nation had to evaluate both Saul's achievements and his errors. The high expectations at the start of his reign, his lack of complete obedience to God, and his subsequent disobedience contributed to his downfall and that of his kingdom. Saul's story serves as a warning about the consequences of wielding power without obedience and humility before the divine. He is remembered not only for his victories and what he could have achieved, but also for his tragic end, which serves as a constant reminder of human fragility before divine commandments. After the events of the consultation and Saul's death, the Witch of Endor continued to be a marginalized figure, living even more isolated due to the fear and respect that her powers invoked. Although the Bible does not detail her final fate, the figure of the witch remains shrouded in mystery, symbolizing the risks and temptations of seeking answers through means not approved by God. Saul's death marked a crucial moment in the political history of Israel. With David assuming the throne, having been anointed by Samuel before Saul's demise, a new dynasty began, and a different relationship between God and his people was established. Unlike Saul, David endeavored to rule according to divine precepts, despite his own reign also facing personal challenges and tragedies. The story of Saul seeking the help of the Witch of Endor is one of the most analyzed biblical episodes in terms of ethics and spirituality. This act of desperation illustrates the grave consequences of seeking guidance outside divine instructions. Highlighting the risks of straying from the paths prescribed by God, the narrative serves as a warning about the dangers of disobedience and the pursuit of power through questionable means. In his moment of great weakness, Saul made a decision that led to his downfall, reminding us that the choices we make under pressure can define our legacy. Reflecting on this story, we are encouraged to consider how historical events provide important lessons for our present and future. Saul's life and tragic end make us think about how our actions and decisions, especially in critical moments, reflect our values and faith. Observing Saul's mistakes and humanity, we can see reflections of our own struggles and ambitions, reminding us that despite changes in eras, human challenges and the quest for divine guidance remain constant. As Isaiah 8:19 warns us, "When they say to consult mediums and spiritists who whisper and mutter, we should answer no." Now leave in the comments if you are already familiar with the story of Saul and the Witch of Endor, give a like to the video, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future videos. A hug, and may God bless you.